Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to start in just a few minutes. Give everyone a few minutes to get on in.
Welcome, everybody. We're so happy you can join us tonight. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes while people continue to come in. For those of us who are used to our Zoom chats last spring, you'll notice that this time it's a different format. These are turning out to be very popular. We've got so many people signed up that we needed to change our format. You'll be able to see all the WOW listers, just not necessarily each other. But by the way, after this whole week of WOW Week, where, we're having a different chat every night this week, after that, once a week, we're going to be focusing on particular countries, particular regions of the world as they open up. So for instance, those of you who are dying to get back to Israel, as soon as Israel announces that it's going to be opening, not just for groups, which is May 23rd, Israel is supposed to open for groups, but then sometime in July, Israel will be opening up to individual private travelers. Then you can bet we're going to have an Israel focused discussion, and for every other destinations too. We'll do it for Western Europe and Eastern Europe and Central America, and as different places open up or have big news. That way we can do a deep dive into those places that interest you most. But for now, we're going to try to cover the entire world in 1 hour. So why don't we, since we've got a lot to cover, why don't we go ahead and get started, since it's 6:01 Eastern time. Hello, everybody. I'm Wendy Perrin of WendyPerrin.com, and with me are my team, Billy Cohen, Brooke Wilkinson. I don't know if you can see them waving right now because I'm not sure if we're on speaker view or gallery view, but and Christine Hawley. Christine, are you there? Great. As well as our trusted travel experts from all over the globe. And so the reason what's been happening lately is, we've been getting now that more and more people are getting vaccinated, we have been getting an enormous number of, somebody's saying cannot hear you very well. Is that cannot hear me well, or cannot hear, can you hear me better now? Well, in any case, we're just swamped with, now that so many people are getting vaccinated, we're swamped with questions from you. And so we thought it would be a good time to share, what we know and what we think you all should know. What everybody wants to know is, where can I go that's low risk and low hassle but high reward? Like, where can I go that's as easy as possible now or sometime in 2021, where it's as low risk as possible, but where I can have the best kind of experience despite COVID. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hundreds of you pre-submitted your questions for our group here. And we went through them all, we distilled them down, and we're going to be answering as many of them as we possibly can. And I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor of WOW Week, which is MedJet. MedJet is an emergency assistance membership program that provides medical air transport and crisis response. And it gives you great peace of mind. I've had a MedJet family membership for years. It gives me great peace of mind, especially nowadays. But more than that, MedJet also, their sponsorship makes it possible for Brooke and Billy and me to answer dozens of your questions every day. So on behalf of everybody here, thank you, MedJet. So now let me just introduce you more to the people on the team. Many of you know Billy. Billy, can you wave? Hopefully you can see her right now. Billy many of you know her because she reaches out to many of you to interview you for articles, right, about these awesome trips you have. And Billy, I think you're very jealous by this point of these spectacular trips that you get to hear all about and write up for us.
I'm so jealous. It's been keeping me going during the pandemic to hear about other people's trips. I love it.
And Billy is our content director and digital strategy director. And we grew up together at Condé Nast Traveler magazine, where we launched Condé Nast Traveler's website. In any case, Billy, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, well, I wanted to thank everyone for being here. It's great to have you. And I just wanted to backtrack a little bit for those of you who are not familiar with what we do here, because we have a lot of people here tonight. So Wendy, Brooke, and I are longtime travel journalists, and with a mission to make travel better for you, specifically for you. And we do that by publishing and constantly updating the Wow list of trusted travel experts, which you'll hear us talk a lot about tonight. It's a collection of exceptionally knowledgeable and well-connected trip planners around the world, some of whom you'll see on your screen tonight. And they're all rigorously vetted and road tested based on Wendy's decades of experience. In fact, she was the first journalist to ever start this kind of list, which I always like to tell people, although she would never brag. It's also based on recent trip reviews from you, our readers. So basically, we vet them, we make the introduction, and through our trip monitoring system, we make sure that you get treated like a VIP and that you then get the chance to review these planners after your trip to help other travelers. So we can't thank you enough for being here and for helping to make everyone else's trips better. It's great to see you all.
Thank you, Billy. So most of you also know Brooke Wilkinson, who also worked with me at Condé Nast Traveler magazine. And Brooke is our resident expert on country entry requirements and how to get the fastest pre-trip COVID testing, and basically everything you need to know about what different countries are doing in the era of COVID. So, and many of you know her because she also is the person answering so many of your travel questions when you want to know who to use for a trip to Costa Rica or where should you go for spring break. Brooke is the person behind so many of those responses you get. So Brooke, I know everybody would love to hear from you.
Hi, thanks, Wendy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. To add to what Billy has explained, for those of you who are new to us, we also offer personalized trip recommendations, as Wendy was just mentioning. So if you're interested in getting our specific thoughts about the trip you have in mind, write to Ask Wendy, which you'll find in the black navigation bar at the top of our website. I've been going through all the questions we received from those of you when you registered for this webinar. And to start out, we're going to be addressing a lot of them as we go forward. But there are two articles that I just want to bring to everyone's attention because they have a lot answers to a lot of the questions that you brought up. The first is the countries that are open to US travelers and what you'll find there, which has everything on entry requirements, what it's like there, are restaurants open for takeout or outdoor dining or indoor dining, and also how to get a quick test for COVID travel, which has both mail-in and in-person options around the country for PCR tests that are returned within 72 hours, sometimes same day, which many countries are requiring for entry. And I think Billy's going to put, has already put links to those articles in the chat, and she'll be adding lots of other useful links over the course of the next hour. So watch the chat for those.
Thank you, Brooke. And yes, please look at those links in the chat because literally 3/4 of the pre-submitted questions we got are answered in those articles. And now let me introduce Christine Hawley, who is our manager, keeps us all in line. Also answers if you have questions about our Wow Moments project and when you're getting your Wow moment, Christine is often the person behind those responses to you. So Christine, would you like to say a quick hello?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here tonight. I hope everybody is too. And I just have a couple of tips for tonight. The raise your hand function, I believe, has been disabled for everybody because there's so many of us joining this Zoom tonight. So if you have a question, it's best to type it into the Q&A that you will find at the bottom of your screen. there. And the chat function is also available, but if you do have a question that's for a panelist, we ask that you put it into the Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much. So now you've met all the team, and now you're going to meet our experts from around the world who have very kindly agreed to join us today to give us a snapshot of what's happening, what's open, and what's worth it around the world. So let's start with the United States. You know, the CDC says now that if you're vaccinated, you can travel at low risk to yourself. And the question is, where should you go? And I think the most obvious thought to everybody is America's national parks. Well, what that means is that everyone is going to the national parks. And I'm not sure how easy it is to, avoid crowds and socially distance when a lot of them are getting booked up. Anyway, Melissa Ladvala, are you here, Melissa? We would love to hear from you, about what's going on with the national parks right now.
Hi, Wendy, I'm here. Yes, thank you for having me. You are spot on. Everybody is thinking about getting outside, and national parks are the perfect destination for that. So things are busy in the national parks, especially for the summer months. So, I mean, we're still working miracles, and we're still getting travelers on trips, even within 30 days, we're working miracles. But I think one of the things to think about, for people who are planning last minute or still thinking about where they can go, is sort of thinking a little bit outside the box. Maybe thinking about parks that are a little lesser known and going to places that are a little bit more off the beaten path. So things like the Pacific Northwest and California and those national parks are a little less visited at the moment compared to something like Wyoming and Utah and things like that. So there's still great space in some of those lesser known parks.
Can you name some of them for us, Melissa? What are some examples of those?
Yeah, some good ones to think about. I mean, one of the ones to think about right now, Olympic National Park in Washington State. You also have North Cascades in Washington State. You also have Mount Rainier, and they're all within about 3 hours of a major airport with Seattle. So those are great ones to think of with an easy entry. California is another one to think about. A lot of people have sort of not thought about visiting California this year because there's been so much kind of closures and restrictions. And so places like Redwoods and Death Valley and even Yosemite are still definitely places that are bookable for the summer months.
Great. Melissa, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So now, Meg Austin. Meg, you are in Vail, Colorado. And I would love to, I'm sure we would all love to know, what would be like your top 2 or 3 tips for if you're going to stay in the US this summer, where can you go, where you can get that outdoor space you want?
My top tips for in the US, if you're looking for space, room to roam, and a great experience, whether it's 2 of you or a family, is come to a ski resort in the summer. It's spectacular. There is so much going on. There's hiking, there's biking, there's paddleboarding. There are concerts, there are farmers markets. There's so much to do. There are accommodations that can handle easily just a couple with a nice fireplace. And it's 5-star accommodations at 3-star pricing because it's our slow season. Right now, springtime, you can come out and you can ski in the morning and golf in the afternoon. That's through May. We've got Breckenridge open. We've got A Basin open. We've got homes that can accommodate a huge multi-generational family. I've got a 12-bedroom, it's called Triple Creek Ranch, where you can do a buyout. It's reasonable in the summer, reasonable in the fall. Colors in the fall are spectacular. There's so much to see and do, and it's outside with so much fresh air and blue sky. It's a perfect opportunity. And the dining, the restaurants. I mean, you've got 5-star dining options, and a lot of them are offering specials because it's our slow season. Another thought is Hawaii. A lot of what has just happened recently with Hawaii is Oahu is not requiring people to be tested to come into Oahu from other islands. We're seeing a lot of 4th night free promotions on the Big Island and in Maui and in Kauai. Go there first, end in Oahu, and then head home. I'm also a scuba expert. There's no COVID underwater. So diving is really a great thing to enjoy.
Meg, do you know Charlie, my older son, he just got certified in scuba in Hawaii last fall. So you'll be happy to know.
I was following all of that, Wendy. I was paying attention.
So in any case, I would love to know, Michelle Allen is here and she is the Disney expert. And I have been wondering, speaking of like challenges in the US, how on earth does Disney operate, like in Orlando, operate differently in a pandemic? Like, is it really, can you really feel like you're having a safe experience?
Yeah, I've had a lot of folks go since the parks opened in July. Right now they're at 35% capacity, so it's definitely less crowded. I encourage families who are wanting to go for maybe a first visit or have younger kids that maybe this isn't the best time, because there are a lot of experiences that are not available right now. There's no fireworks, there's no scheduled parades, there's no fast passes. So Disney looks different. But again, I've had a lot of families go and everybody comes back with great experiences. At 35% capacity, there's fewer crowds. There's less lines, less waiting. So that's attractive for a lot of folks. But for families with younger kids, the character meet and greets aren't there. The fireworks, it's a different experience. Mm-hmm. They are temperature checking temperatures every time you enter a park, sanitizing stations everywhere. They're doing a really good job in terms of keeping everybody safe, but it is busy. It is busy. So if you're afraid, maybe not the best time to visit Disney World, but people are going.
I know they are going. I've heard from a lot of people who've been actually. So thank you, Michelle. Now, for people who want to stay in the United States, but kind of get as remote as they can possibly get, a lot of people are thinking Alaska. Alaska this summer, I think, is going to be really popular. And at the same time, we've gotten news recently that some cruise ships and small ship expedition lines are actually going to be operating this summer. So I would love to ask Ashton Palme. Ashton, are you there? You're in Seattle, which is, of course, the gateway to Alaska. And I'd love to hear sort of an update on what's going on with small ship cruises and Alaska.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy. Yes, some of the smaller cruise lines, the expedition cruise lines that we refer to them as, are starting to operate in May and in June, July, and August. And these are small ships that are 150 passengers or less. They are vaccinated all of their crew and staff, and they are requiring that passengers over 18 are vaccinated as well. And they're very used to managing protocols and health and safety on board. I think it's going to be a wonderful year to travel to Alaska. We have lots of people that were booked to travel last year, and certainly some who are booking now. I think the big difference this year is that the large cruise ships will not be traveling in Alaska this year. This is the first time in probably 50 plus years that you'll have Alaska's Inside Passage practically to yourself. And my background today is Glacier Bay. It's an amazing place, wilderness, wildlife, and just, I think, a great opportunity to get on some ships with people who are vaccinated and want to get away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashton. So now for people who want to leave the US, and there are actually... Oh.
Can I jump in? Before we move out of the US, we have a question about Disneyland. Maybe we can go back to Michelle. I know that Disneyland in California just opened recently. Michelle, do you have anything to share about these?
I do, yeah, absolutely. They opened on April 30th, so just a few days ago, but only to California residents right now. And only one hotel is open, the Grand Californian. The other two still remain closed. So work in progress.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
So if we're ready to leave the US and think other countries, you know, a lot of people want a tropical escape. And actually there have been sunny escapes nearby that have been feasible, that have been open for months now. People have been traveling there. They've returned saying they felt so like it was like the best trip ever. They felt safe and they had a wonderful time. One of those places is Mexico. Zach Rabinor, who is in Puerto Vallarta right now. Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, is Mexico, how, I think a lot of people wonder, is Mexico really safe? Like, how can you be safe in Mexico? Can you just give us an idea of what a Mexico trip can be like now?
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Wendy, and the whole team for putting this together, and all of the readers for being here. Great to see all of fellow trusted travel experts too. So Mexico hasn't just been open for a few months, it never actually closed. So we've been open through the whole pandemic, which seemed kind of psychotic at first and then brilliant, and now it's probably both. But you know, I'll say what I said in our first chats is anywhere really safe? You know, and I think, so just the basic premises that go for every destination, right? Social distancing, sanitizing, hand washing, mask wearing, all of those things are going on incredibly. And as you said, Wendy, most people, in fact, all of our clients who've come during the pandemic have been blown away by how well these protocols have been carried out throughout Mexico. That coupled with its proximity, the numerous outdoor dining and activity options have made it a great option throughout the pandemic.
What activities are curtailed? I mean, what can't
Sure.
you do?
Good question. So, but I just want to touch on one last thing. You know, this question of is Mexico safe is an age-old question about Mexico pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, people always ask this question. So, yes, I think it can be safe if you take the precautions. Now, what's curtailed? Mexico is largely open. There are a few things that are restricted or even closed. I would say, if I may generalize, so as not to go through a laundry list, most archaeological sites are functioning, at least the principal archaeological sites are functioning on limited capacity and limited hours. Some of the secondary sites and even a few primary sites are closed. Restaurants and dining are limited in their operations. So they're generally closing around 10 p.m., which for Americans is not an issue at all. Mexicans are up in arms because that's typically the hour that they begin dining. But yeah, for visitors, that doesn't really seem to interrupt their schedules at all. And I also want to just drill down a little bit that Mexico is a massive country. And it's like saying, is the US safe? You know, like going to Wyoming is very different than going to New York City, is very different than going to Florida. And going to Mexico City is very different than going to Puerto Vallarta, is very different than going to the Costa or perhaps Tulum. So it really counts. It really matters to kind of get a drill down into where precisely are you going and what's your goal. Believe it or not, a lot of people have come to Mexico during the pandemic seeking large gatherings, parties. I mean, I'm sure you've heard and seen Tulum, Sayulita, you know, other millennial type of hotspots have had these types of gatherings. So again, with the right goals, with the right precautions, and with the right information. So the final thing I'd say, and I think this is true for all the destinations that are represented today, one of the best things you can do to maximize your safety, minimize being in dangerous or what feel like dangerous situations, is to travel with an expert. And so I think everyone who's here today on the screen really can assist in maximizing not just your enjoyment, but your safety and making sure that you are in the right place at the right time. Almost all of us specialize in private experiences. We've done for years, pre-pandemic, pre-buying of tickets, minimizing lines, getting you insider access, going to things when there aren't a lot of crowds. So this is nothing new for us. So yeah, those would be my quick tips.
Great, thank you, Zach. Now I want to move a little bit south to Belize. Patricia Johnson, you are in Belize now. And, you know, Belize has become really, really popular lately. So many people are going there for sort of like almost like a more affordable Caribbean experience. You could even sail, go on a catamaran for a week, which feels like a very safe experience. So Patricia, can you just tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in Belize and what activities might be, what can't you do if you decide to venture to Belize at this time? Can you still have a good trip?
Yeah, in Belize, the risk is very minimal. We have very low COVID numbers at this time. And the tourism sector is getting vaccinated as well. So all our tourism workers are lining up to get their vaccines. Right now, pretty much everything is open except for strictly bars. And we do still have a 10 p.m. curfew on the weekdays and 12 p.m. on the weekends. But in terms of restaurants, there are many open door restaurants here, so all of that is open. You can do all of the tours, you can rent vehicles, you can rent golf carts. Pretty much everything is open for tourists at this time, and it's not as crowded as it was in previous years before the pandemic. So it's a great time to visit and have archaeological sites all to yourselves, for example.
Yeah, Belize has also been open for so many months now that they've really gotten down how to do it right,
Yeah.
And Costa Rica is another one. Irene Edwards, are you here? Irene is in Costa Rica, and they've also been open for many months now. Irene, are you here?
Hi everyone. This is so exciting. Can you hear me?
I think so.
Hi.
I hope so. Hi, Irene. What are you seeing in Costa Rica now?
Yes, Wendy. So Costa Rican borders are wide open to tourists. There's no quarantine required for travelers or any other special requirements to enter the country as per today. And what I'm seeing right now is that everyone is rushing to plan their holiday trip. And some of the hotels and local providers have some promotions that we could take advantage of and apply to your trips.
I see. So it's like they're looking toward the holidays, like the Christmas, New Year period. Basically, that's kind of when people are planning to do their Costa Rica trip.
Yeah, definitely. Even for 2022, people are starting to plan their trips as well.
Planning far ahead. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank
And
you.
so speaking of another tropical escape that actually it was open, Tahiti and Bora Bora, French Polynesia, it was open in the fall. We know some people who went there and had an amazing time. Billy got to interview them and write an article about it and get jealous. And then French Polynesia closed for a while, and now it just reopened, I think, on Saturday. And can you tell us a little bit about that, Kleon Howe, about French Polynesia? Kleon, are you here?
I had to unmute myself, sorry.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody, for putting this together and for everyone that's visiting today. Yes, French Polynesia opened July 15th of last year, and then it closed again on February 3rd. And the reason for that was that the French government wanted to bring particularly the island groups that they're associated with France. They wanted to be able to start a level playing field where they can start vaccinating their populations without other kind of influences coming in. So after 3 months of being closed, they're now reopening again. They did reopen on Saturday, and the first flight actually arrived on yesterday morning. So what they focused on while they were closed was, as I said, the vaccination, but also they instituted before the closure, but they really went out where they created sort of a medical corps. And what they did is they trained them and they sent them out to all of the islands and trained them on protocols for keeping your hands washed, cleaning down the tables and everything that there is. And also they would go out with the ability to vaccinate as well. And what that has done is created a very confident people that they are ready now to welcome arrivals into Tahiti. The one thing they did change, there's still the tests and things like that, but they do now require that all arriving passengers be vaccinated and that or have antibodies for COVID. So that is a new requirement. And there are tests involved. And what I found is that with my clients that went, we just gave them a timeline of when they needed to do things. I helped them get the tests because it is a specific RT-PCR test, which was not as easily a come by. It's much easier now to get within a quick time frame turnaround. So I send out the itemized itinerary of where they're going to be tested and what they're going to be doing, and then everything flows very quickly because it's they're really practiced and worked hard in French Polynesia to get everything cleared, and so people aren't waiting around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that update. Another tropical escape nearby that actually is extremely, it has been so hugely popular. The Galapagos Islands, part of Ecuador, in the Pacific Ocean of South America. The Galapagos Islands have been so popular. I remember pre-pandemic, you had to book your Galapagos trip like 18 months ahead. And now I think it's a very different situation there, but the Galapagos have been open for months, many months. Ali Almario, I would love to ask you about, I'm kind of surprised at the Galapagos. I think when I think of the Galapagos Islands, I think of one of the most isolated and fragile and really protected environments in the world. And I'm wondering, how has the pandemic changed? Has all the nature and wildlife in the Galapagos, has it kind of benefited from the pandemic, or has it been a terrible risk? What's going on right now?
Well, thankfully, the Galapagos has always been fragile, protected. The national park has always had very strict rules within the park. So the fact that we didn't have as many people going in and out of the Galapagos really didn't affect the wildlife that much. Now, quite a few ships did pause operations in the last couple of months, which meant a huge shift in moving people around forward for another date in the future. But the good thing is that while they paused operations, that gave them great time to sort of sit back, figure out how to do small ship expedition cruising at the best possible level for safety and for protecting both the humans and the wildlife. The other thing is that the archipelago, actually, probably in the next 2 months, all the human population is expected to be vaccinated. So not only the tourism industry, but the people who live there. What that means is that anyone coming to the Galapagos, they're going to literally have what already was remote, even more remote. We just had a family, as you know, that just came back from the Galapagos. I warned them to please be flexible on their trip. And actually, the day they were flying out from LA to the Galapagos, their ship actually had to change. So we had to switch them to a completely different ship 3 or 4 days before they arrived. The good thing was, being on a ship, they ended up having the entire 16-passenger ship to themselves. There were no other people. So they ended up sailing the Galapagos on their own private yacht, basically unexpectedly, which was great for them. The other thing is that I think you normally see a ratio of 1 to 16, one guide for 16 guests. Right now, you're probably seeing closer to 6 to 8. So it really feels private. It really feels as if you're sort of step back in time once again. And I really think that the demand in the next 6 to 8 months is through the roof. So people really need to book far in advance, because we've got 2 years.
You still do? Like, you can't just decide to go tomorrow. you still have to book way far in advance.
Because there's still limited sailings.
Okay.
A lot of the ships are still kind of easing back into sailing. But you've got basically a 1.5 years worth of people who have postponed trips crammed into sailing. And literally maybe about 70 ships. Most of them are fairly small, 16 to 48 passenger. So we're not talking about cruise ships with 1,000 spaces. We're talking about very limited spaces. And for the best yachts, the best guides, they're going to go fast and they're very high in demand.
It's very interesting. Eric Sheets, you were just in the Galapagos, right? Weren't you on a yacht with your family, your 3 daughters? How was it?
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Sheets, and I was just in the Galapagos a few weeks ago, and it was a real treat to be able to show them the pristineness. And what really was so unique about it is that the visitation sites usually are with 2 or 3 other boats, and in this case, I was on a 30-passenger boat, and there were no other boats visiting. I've been to the Galapagos for more than 25 times, and I've never seen nature come this close. For example, my 9-year-old was able to basically spend almost 20 minutes with a penguin dancing around, swimming around her. So that they're usually pretty shy creatures. And similar to what Ali said, Ecuador does not require, you can enter Ecuador now with just your vaccine card, which facilitates a lot of travelers. Although to enter in the Galapagos, you have to take the PCR test within 96 hours prior to your flight to the Galapagos.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Wendy, when we're on the topic of exotic destinations, I just wanted to jump in. We had a question from someone who registered asking, I'm vaccinated, where can I go without masks 24/7? I think a lot of people want to know, where can they kind of get a little bit of life as it was pre-COVID? And I can say that when I went to the Maldives in October, that was my experience there, because you have a private villa, you're on a private island, everything is outdoors. It ends up feeling very much like pre-COVID times. My husband and I had masks and almost never used them because all the restaurants were outside. We were always either in the water or in our private overwater bungalow. So I think Tahiti is much like that, and some of these other places as well.
Right. Interesting. So back to sort of South America, which I know has been hit very hard by COVID. But Peru is open, and I'm surprisingly not. I mean, like, there are people who are traveling in Peru. I was speaking with Tom Damon the other day, who has some travelers there right now at Machu Picchu, and I was so intrigued by that. Tom, are you here? I'd love to hear a little bit about what they're doing. And they can't get into Machu Picchu, but they're hiking at a different range, and the Inca Trail is closed, but they're doing other things instead.
Yes, hi, Wendy, and hello, everybody. Great to be with you. So just to clarify, they're actually not there now. They're actually getting ready. They're preparing to go in about just a few weeks.
Okay.
And so what happened in that case was that they were not able to do the Inca Trail. So most importantly to know, Machu Picchu is open. The Inca Trail specifically is closed. The permit office is closed. So their initial plan was to hike the Inca Trail, but we came up with an alternative trek for them in the Urubamba mountain range. It's called the Lares trek, and they're able to do that. We have them scheduled, and interesting to note, they'll actually be able to still hike into Machu Picchu. So there's essentially, think about it as a sort of a back door or a shortcut to the Inca Trail. And there's a trailhead from kilometer 104 from the train route where you can get off and you can hike 7 miles into Machu Picchu. And that route is open. We can get permits for that. Anybody can get permits for that right now. So that actually allows you to hike in on foot, just essentially like the Incas did. You can also, if you don't want to hike, you can take the train. The train is open. And as I say, Machu Picchu itself is open. So another important aspect to know is that once you're inside Machu Picchu, there are going to be areas that are still closed. Think of it as access points, or maybe like spokes of a bicycle wheel. Machu Picchu itself being the hub, and then heading off like spokes of a wheel are side hikes. Most famously, Huayna Picchu, the backdrop that you see in many Machu Picchu photographs. That route is closed. It's a very narrow trail, steep in places. So that is closed until further notice. I just
have a feeling with the COVID numbers the way they are right now, most people are probably, if they're planning a trip, it's probably for what, like the late fall or next year?
Yes, that's true. And I'm recommending as you mentioned, Peru was hard hit by COVID. I'm recommending travelers to consider August through December at the earliest. So holiday trips are certainly feasible. It's just the start of the rainy season over the holidays, the end of year holidays, but it is feasible. And then certainly next year, April through November during the dry season. But I would say at the soonest, August would be, or late summer into fall would be still the dry season in Peru, and it's a great time to be at Machu Picchu.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. Now I would love to shift gears and head over to Europe, because we have a number of European experts with us who are up at midnight or 1 a.m. their time. And I don't want to keep them up any longer, but there are some, the big news recently of course, the EU said that they are going to let in, vaccinated Americans will be permitted in this summer. We're waiting for more details on that. But then France announced that it is opening in June 9th, I think. And France, Philip, you're in Provence right now, aren't you? Philip Haslett.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us at past midnight your time. We would love to hear is France really going to be ready? Like, when is the optimal time for people actually to go? Because we have a lot of people who keep asking us, when can we go to France? When can we go to France? What's your honest, when is going to be the right timing?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Wendy, for a start, for organizing this. And it's a delight to be up at 1 o'clock in the morning to answer questions. So the 9th of June is the official date. The 30th of June is the day when the curfew is going to be over, when restaurants will be fully open, and when events will be able to start taking place again. The big question is it all going to go according to plan? And that's what we have to wait. It depends on French numbers coming down. Everything's going in the right direction right now. So I'm feeling very positive about everything. What you have to remember is that Europe is going to be able to travel from the 9th of June. And last year, Europe was traveling a lot. That means everything was full. Last year, we couldn't get a hotel booking in July, August. Everything was full. So my feeling is that the 30th of June, the day when things are really open, there's going to be a sort of massive rush of Europeans to travel. And I personally, if it's me, would say, wait a little while, wait for that sort of big sort of summer holiday rush in Europe throughout July and perhaps even August. But I think really as of August is going to be the best sort of time to come. Officially 30th of June if you want to give it a go, but expect people. Last year, everything was open for Europeans, so there was an awful lot of people everywhere we went. Saint-Tropez was packed. And then, of course, France is a vast country. So we were talking earlier about national parks in the States. France has got a vast number of areas where you can get away from it all, get into your own bubble as well, if you do want to come earlier.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Can I jump in with a question? We have a lot of people who are vaccinated themselves, but have children who are not old enough yet to be vaccinated. Someone's asking about France, if they're allowing in vaccinated travelers, but children are not yet vaccinated. Do you know what the rules are? I know in some places, Iceland is open to vaccinated travelers, but letting children follow the rules of their parents. So if the child is not vaccinated, they can still get in without a quarantine. French Polynesia, by contrast, is saying your child still needs to quarantine. So what do you know what the situation will be in France?
Right. Well, right now it's all to do with this the passport, which they want to bring in hopefully by the 9th of June, which is going to be a European thing to start with, and then we'll spread. So far, what they're saying is that yes, there are 3 cases where you'll be able to actually have a passport. The first one is vaccination. The second one is PCR test, negative PCR test within 72 hours. That's the present information we have. And that is what is going to apply for children, I would think. And also there's the fact if you have antibodies as well, that's the third one that goes on this passport, but you'll still need a negative PCR test. So I think that's what they're going to maintain. Right now, they're kind of, we're waiting, but that's what they said so far. There's going to be a European passport. The French have gone off on their own on this one at the moment. I've got a feeling everything's going to come back together and join up. But that's how it's looking, is that children will need a PCR test, negative PCR test, 72 level.
Philip, thank you. So now, Greg Tepper, are you here, Greg? Eastern Europe specialist. You were saying the other day that this summer marks a really unusual opportunity for vaccinated Americans. I mean, the EU has said, you know, who will be permitted in and who won't be permitted in. I'm wondering if you can, you know, sort of tell us, you know, give us sort of overview of Europe this summer, and how would it be different this summer than it was pre-pandemic, like in 2018 or 2019?
Question, Wendy?
I'm sorry? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of a internet problem.
Oh, Zoom trouble. Okay, yeah, no, I was just asking about, you know, the sort of, the EU has said it's going to permit vaccinated travelers, which means a lot of unvaccinated people, and a lot of nationalities that in the past used to crowd Europe basically won't be allowed in, which will make for a very unusual summer. So I was wondering if you could comment a little bit.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing about the approach that Europe has taken is that they're going to be focused on vaccinated travelers. And because Americans are to provide opportunities. Can you hear me still?
I think so.
Okay, that's going to provide opportunities to Americans because there're just going to be fewer other travelers, particularly from the countries that have done a great job at controlling COVID. But because they were controlling COVID so well, they've been slow to vaccinate. So the countries such as Japan and China, South Korea, even Australia and New Zealand, there'll be fewer travelers coming from those countries into Europe. Which really for Americans traveling there, we haven't seen in decades, where the international travelers, you know, are really coming from the United States, as opposed to Asia and Asia Pacific. So that's what I think, that there's some great opportunities for people to come in and see things with shorter lines and more access to hotel rooms and tickets to museums, things like that, that again, we haven't seen for quite a few years in Europe.
Very interesting. Well, one of those places that can get so crowded in the summertime normally is Croatia. Gwen Kozlowski, I would love to ask you about, do you think Croatia would, how will Croatia be different? How is it different now? Because it's open now. And, you know, for the rest of 2021, because normally that can be a very crowded place with all the cruise ships coming in. And what kind of opportunity does it represent now?
Sure. Actually, it was less than 2 years ago, I was on a panel about over-tourism in Croatia. So it's so fun that we're talking about this. I think the big difference you see this year is twofold. Number one, no big cruise ships. And that was always a big problem in a place that is a walled city like Dubrovnik. And then you have 5 cruise ships docked offshore, dumping 20,000 people on, you know, essentially a tiny medieval city. And this year, it looks like there won't be any of the big cruise ships. And the second thing is no big groups. So as Greg mentioned, with travelers from other destinations, a lot of times those travelers were coming on 55 passenger buses. And that is also problematic in small towns. And we have a unique opportunity this year to, you know, see these destinations with other Europeans instead of with bus loads and cruise ship loads of people. So for now, Croatia is great and everything is open. All the museums are open, but Croatia is not really like an indoor museum heavy country. So it's a place that's made for outdoor living and social distancing, and almost every restaurant has outdoor dining. So it's a really, it's almost unrecognizable from before because there's so much fewer people, and life goes on as it did before the pandemic. There are still masks indoors. So when you're inside a restaurant, before you sit down, you're wearing a mask. When you're in hotels, not in like the pool area, you're masked. But other than that, it's kind of a nice semi-tropical destination that you can visit with relatively few restrictions.
Yeah, it's like an outdoor museum. And I know another outdoor museum, which is Istanbul, and all of Turkey, in fact. And I want to thank Karen Fedorko Sefer so much for joining us. It's almost 2 a.m, I think, in Istanbul right now. But Karen, so it's so great to have you here. And I know a lot of people who have been to Turkey during this pandemic, actually. And what they've said, they've reported that basically they have all these historic sites completely to themselves, and that actually like everything was really easy, the COVID testing, all of it. Why don't you tell us about some of what happens and how the testing works and all that?
Great. Okay. Thanks, Wendy. And thanks to all the readers that are on. Actually, Turkey has never closed, similar to Mexico. We opened on June 1st, 2020, and we've been open ever since, and we're still open today. And people have been traveling consistently from the original date of opening until now. I would suggest that if somebody's ready to travel or ready to come, starting with June 1st, 2021, the sites and everything will be open. Are
many restaurants still closed? I feel like aren't the restaurants closed, or did that end?
Right now we have the Ramadan period, which is a 1-month period. And during Ramadan, the government decided to do a lockdown of the country to prevent gatherings, family get-togethers. And it's a very important religious holiday where everybody goes everywhere and travels through the country, and they fly to visit their relatives. So they basically locked down the country to eliminate that. And on May 17th, when the Ramadan period is over, new protocols will be in place. Currently, restaurants are closed. They're only open for takeout, no indoor and no outdoor dining. But after May 17th, we believe that will be lifted. But right now, we do have clients that are in Turkey traveling, and they don't really care about the restaurants because they want to see the sites. And all of the sites are open, but the problem is that there's nobody there. And so it's not a problem. I mean, it's great for them. For example, last week we had a biblical tour going through the countryside, and they went to ancient Perge, which is a Roman city in the south of Turkey, and they were the only ones there with their guide. So there was 3 people in the site of Perge. It was like a special opening of this gigantic Roman city just for them. We have a similar issue in Ephesus, where normally, as Gwen said, we have the huge cruise ships that are coming into Ephesus. There's no large cruise ships this year. And where we would normally have, say, 50,000 people in Ephesus in a day, the cap on Ephesus is now 650 people, and approximately between 100 and 200 people are going in that site on a daily basis. So you can imagine how wonderful it is to see Ephesus under these conditions. So we believe that after the 17th of May, everything will open. Currently, the bazaars are closed, the balloons are not operating, so we really don't want anybody to come until after the 17th of May. We are able to schedule COVID tests for our clients. We make it super simple. They take the test before they go on tour in the morning, and then they get their test results back that evening. We take the tests at the hotel, so it's very, very convenient. So there's nothing to worry about. You need to have a PCR test 72 hours prior to arrival to come in. and you need a you just need to fill out a health form and get your visa, and you're in. So, I would say from the bookings that we're looking at, the summer is going to be very, very busy. So if you're thinking about coming to Turkey in the summer, you should think about booking it now. Last year in 2020, our resort areas were fully booked for June, July, August, and September. Most of the hotels were 100% occupancy. So it's really important that you really think about that, because if it was like that last year, it's going to be even more so this year. So
I think a lot of people here in the U.S. forget like all of the other countries that are going to Turkey, especially, leaving Europe and going to Turkey. So, Karen, thank you so much for those insights. I want to turn now for a moment to Italy, because we have gotten more questions about Italy. And with the EU expecting to allow in vaccinated, we have just gotten so many questions about like, when can I go to Italy? When can I go to Italy? I wanted to ask Andrea Grisdale first. Andrea lives on Lake Como. And, Andrea has been basically like throughout this entire pandemic, I've seen photos on Facebook of like, she's having picnics on the mountain, and she's like, almost living almost a normal life, whenever there isn't a lockdown. Andrea, can you just tell us a little bit about what's I know a lot of stuff is open in Italy. What's closed? Like what is it that you can't do in Italy nowadays? And when do you think is the right timing if people are thinking about a future trip? What's good timing for them?
Thank you, Wendy. I think, the good thing, what we're actually aiming for and recommending to our travelers is to think about Italy from Q3 onwards, 2021. So expect to see our travelers from July onwards. Right now, what you cannot do is indoor dining. You can definitely enjoy outdoor dining. Also, Wendy, I wanted to mention to you something I actually see personally as a positive for our travelers is the big thing that we should expect and that we're experiencing right now is reduced capacity on planes, trains, boats, also at major sites, which really, of course, all adds up to enhancing the traveler experience. On the flip side, however, when we are speaking with our travelers, we do have to gently push them to say, listen, you really need to be thinking about blocking things sooner rather than later to make sure you get the day and the time that you prefer to visit these places. I know we were discussing earlier also openings. The Vatican museums, they reopened today. And for example, we just also heard today that the La Scala Opera House will be reopened from next Monday, the 10th of May. Health security protocols are very much defined here and in place, and I have to say, respected as well. So we have our masks, we have our gel, and we do feel very, very safe. And as you mentioned, the picnics and etc. I think, it's not really that difficult to really enjoy Italy and have a fantastic time.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.
Maria Landers and Brian Dore, Italy and Switzerland specialists. What I would love to ask you guys is, you were saying that you have a lot of people coming in the fall. Like fall seems to be a time when just a lot of people are now booking Italy trips, thinking, okay, that's a good. How is it that you all are sort of like minimizing the risk for them, maximizing the experience?
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Oh, I thought you said, shall I go ahead? A lot of people are contacting us, and as you know, a lot of people had to postpone last year. So people from last year are trying to figure out when they can come. And as everybody knows, for every destination, there's a lot of pent-up travel demand. So everybody wants to come as soon as possible. And the EU has announced that they hope to open for the summer, and we're optimistic about that Italy will be opening. And what we've been seeing touch with all of our guides and drivers. Everybody's getting vaccinated. Vaccinations are still rolling out there. But the great thing about Italy as well is it's a natural, as Gwen was saying about Croatia, so many things are outdoors. So even in the fall, in September, October, November, you can do cooking experiences outside. You can, go on a hike. You can visit all of the outdoor cultural sites, the monuments, the ancient Roman ruins and things. So all of that is outdoors. I think that when they do reopen, we're going to see limitations, as Andrea mentioned, on capacity. So a lot of hotels, for example, with pools, they're limiting the number of chairs around the pool. They're limiting, you have to make a reservation. They're limiting numbers of people in vans. So before, where we might have a family of 5 or 6 in a van, a minivan of 8, we might have to have 2 cars for them now, just because everybody is just being a little more distanced, which, I think is prudent. So we feel that it will be once open, and we plan to go ourselves on July 2nd. So we will be over there and visiting things and investigating, and we don't see any reason why many of the things that our travelers have always enjoyed can't still be enjoyed in this environment.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. So before we leave Europe and head to Africa, and I'm sorry this is going on a little longer than we planned, but I'm fascinated by hearing these snapshots from around the world. We'll try to speed it up, but just very quickly, a lot of people have been asking about England. And I wanted to ask Jonathan Epstein, who is specialist for the UK and Ireland. One viewer submitted a question. The EU has welcomed US visitors. What is the status of visits to England now that they are no longer in the EU? For all those people who want to go to England, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think things overall are really confident. Things are good. A lot of what's happening with the UK and the US is bilateral. So there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes between both governments. I think both governments are really excited about the percentage of populations that have been vaccinated. So there's less of, overall announcements, but a lot of goalposts that really do point towards summer travel as possible. But I think we're going to hear a lot more good news in the next week or two. They've been really good about many announcements and kind of painting these goalposts. But remember, 50 million doses of vaccine out of 66 million total people have already been administered in the UK. And they are announced that they're going to have a green, amber, red system for allowing people in. So it looks like even worst case scenario with the relationship now between the UK and the US, it would be a test in advance and a test on arrival. But that's even before they've talked about what they're going to do in terms of respect for vaccinations, which they're clearly a company that puts a premium on that based on their own numbers. So I think things look really positive.
So interesting. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I now want to head to our last continent today, which is Africa. I think when a lot of people hear Africa, they think, oh my God, I couldn't possibly go there during COVID. And concern is understandable. But here's the thing. I mean, I have spoken to a lot of travelers who have been to Africa and had amazing trips during the pandemic. And first, I want to call on Julian Harrison, Julian, you're going on your 3rd trip to Africa, I think on Friday. You've been to, we've gotten amazing reviews from travelers who've come back from Kenya on trips you've arranged. And I'm just curious, like, how do you make it? How do you minimize risk in Africa for travelers?
Thank you, Wendy. I think Africa is seen as, potentially unsafe, but realistically, if you look at some of the statistics, African countries that offer safaris have actually been blessed in terms of having very low infection rates and very low mortality rates. I mean, if you look at Botswana, for example, they've had less than 50,000 infections and around 700 mortalities. And that's very similar to many of the countries in Africa. And I think part of it is, from a safety point of view, it's easy to social distance. If you go to any safari camps, they are very small in terms of the numbers of people they can accommodate. They're very spread out. The vehicles that you travel in are open air vehicles. even the main areas where you might have dining, your dining areas and so on, are all open air for the most part. So it's easy. Camps will have, up to 10 different dining venues in one camp, and they're able to just spread people out to different places for their meals. And I think the countries also in Africa are taking it very seriously. I mean, it's encouraging that, all countries, when they get their vaccines, obviously they put their frontline workers, their healthcare workers, in, first in line. But countries like Kenya and Uganda have actually announced that that's going to happen with the healthcare workers, but the tourism and hospitality industry comes next in line. So, they are taking it very, very seriously in that case. And, one other case in point actually is the country of Zimbabwe. The gateway to Zimbabwe for tourism is through the town of Victoria Falls. And what they've done is they've gone and vaccinated the entire population of Victoria Falls, and they now have herd immunity in Victoria Falls. So people go through that area and onto safaris and into these camps where, all the staff have been tested and they've been vaccinated and things like that. So your risk in these areas is very, very low.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting, Julian. Thank you. Sherry, are you still awake? Sherry Briggs, safari expert coming to us from Mauritius. Do we still have you? Because it must be 3 a.m. in Mauritius right now.
It is 3 a.m. I think if we can carry on, I'll go kayaking soon and watch the sun come up. So, yeah, no, I'm awake. I'm fairly awake.
Okay,
and,
good.
I do have some things to share with you.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the sort of time. I mean, we're getting so many questions from travelers like, should I do my safari now or wait until next year? And there really are, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting sort of pros and cons of both. But you and I were talking to Dr. Timothy Trish, who is going to be our guest tomorrow night. Tomorrow, he is an expert on the coronavirus and vaccines. And what was so interesting is he was saying if he had a choice between going now or next year, he would go now. And it's partly because the vaccine is like fresh in your, like it's strong, it's fresh, you just got it. We know it lasts at least 6 months. We don't know about after that. And also the variants, we know that the vaccines are effective against the variants now. We don't know about any new variants that might come up next year. So I would just love to, that was fascinating to me to hear. And I would love to ask you, like, what do you think about now versus later in terms of a safari in Africa?
Well, I think a lot of people are still in a kind of wait and see pattern and, caution. They think that potentially things will become more predictable, but as Dr. Trish says, they could become less predictable. And right now, I feel for the next 6 to 8 months, we have a good lay of the land. As Julian said, most of the countries in Africa have had an extremely low infection rate. In Namibia, under 700 people have died. I mean, if you look at, this is a well-populated country, Botswana, the same, Rwanda, 300 people. Africa has been impacted very little compared to Europe, Brazil, South America, and the United States. So the impact has been minimal, relatively speaking. And a lot of the things that were mentioned earlier come into play there. And that is that people are outside a lot and they're spread out and there could be some natural immunity. But right now, I feel that frankly, if you were my best friend and you were asking me, shall I go this year or next year? I would say go now. And we've sent a lot of people very successfully over the last few months, and they're coming back, and some of them are repeat travelers, and they're just completely blown away. Because it's kind of like visiting the Africa of 25 years ago in a more innocent, calm time where, if you're really looking for a very special experience, there's a lion kill over there or whatever, you are not battling other vehicles to get there. So, you know, fewer people are there right now, and that has huge advantages. It calms the animals down. They are more in charge of their home base. So you're experiencing nature in a more natural way. And the other advantage in going sooner than later is that, you know, anybody who's been to Africa, which I would imagine is a lot of this audience, have experienced that in going to Africa, that it's not just about the wildlife. The people in Africa are at least half the experience. And these people have been sitting for a year and a half waiting for us to come back. And whoa, the welcome is just overwhelmingly warm. No one can do enough for you. It's always a great hospitality industry, but it's just over the moon right now. The delight on people's faces and so on. And in terms of safety protocols, you know, you have to think of where the African safari heritage lies. And it's in colonial Africa, which was basically military. So we have, I think, an easier job than many of the other people that we're talking to tonight from Europe and different parts of the world. People in Africa kind of do what they're told. They plan in advance. They are really buttoned up. And if you're in the safari industry and you're not buttoned up, you're going to make some really, really serious mistakes. So people don't make mistakes, and they do follow the rules. And people, if they're told to wear masks, they wear masks. If they're told you have to follow these sanitation procedures, they do. But the biggest advantage in terms of safety, I mean, obviously you're going there with a big boost if you've had a vaccine, but when you talk about social distancing, many of the lodges in Botswana, you're in 200,000 acres of private reserve with 15 other people. So you've got a lot of social distancing going on there. And so there's that. And then there's also the fact that many lodges right now are offering upgrades to seriously private experiences that normally would cost you a fortune. Private guides, private vehicles, private charters in some cases, for example, in Zambia, from camp to camp, that you're not paying extra for. And normally you pay a lot for that. Even like if you're 4 people, you might get your own camp. So you can take your family or your friends, and you all know each other anyway. So it's really very easy to facilitate a safe experience. Your only contact points that you might feel nervous about would be the airports. And
that's just it. I think a lot of people are thinking, yeah, but the flight over there, the long flight to Africa, but we'll be hearing about that. That's what we'll be hearing about on Wednesday from the airline experts, but also tomorrow from Dr. Trish.
Yes, exactly. So contact can be minimal as soon as you hit the land, but you will be in that airplane. Unless you have a private one. One of your buddies has a private plane, then, you know.
I'm surprised how many people can afford private airline flights nowadays. Yeah. Sherry, thank you so much. That we really appreciate your insights. I just want to move along to Egypt, because I was really surprised when Jim Berkeley told me that he's got, I mean, all these people going to Egypt, like hundreds of travelers from now through the fall, mainly in the fall, right? Or in the Christmas, New Year's period?
Thank you, Wendy, for hosting this, and welcome to all your listeners. Yeah, Wendy, it was, well, as of October last, Egypt opened with very strict protocols according to WHO regulations. So all the hotels, all the cruise ships, all the vehicles were operated at 50% occupancy. And of course, taking advantage of all the face masks and things we've heard about today. We started to get a trickle of bookings then, and all of a sudden in November, our Christmas and New Year's bookings were just off the charts, like back to the good old days. And that has continued. I mean, just to give you an example, we have people arriving back from Egypt today. We have people leaving for Egypt next week. Joni Mitchell produced her, by the way. We have people leaving in June, July, September. I just booked today a family of 12 on a Dahabaya charter. So I realize what the State Department warnings have said, but I think people are realizing Egypt, a little bit like the rest of Africa, is number 60 on the list of world COVID countries with COVID and seriousness. So, you know, that it's, to be honest with you, it's better to go to Egypt than stay here in the USA. So I think people are starting to realize we don't need to be afraid about everything. Everything isn't going to be perfect. And Egypt's done a very, very good job, in my view, of addressing this situation and giving people a sense of comfort. So that's part of the reason for this success, I believe.
Jim, what can't travelers do in Egypt right now? I mean, if you're trying to choose between, you know, what's closed, what activities can't they do, what sites can't they see?
You know, the Grand Egyptian, everybody wants the Grand Egyptian Museum, GEM, to open, of course. That's not going to open until probably the second half of 2022. Everything is open, Wendy, but it's open on a much restricted basis. So if you go into Queen Nefertari's tomb, you're not going to go in with 10 or 12 other people. They'll do it your small group at a time. And of course, like Africa right now, the number of people in Egypt is very low. So people go to these sites and they really have them to themselves. So we haven't had anybody come back and say, gosh, you know, we couldn't get into Karnak Temple or we couldn't get into King Tut's tomb. That has not happened.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you. And
thank you.
I would like to move on now to another part of Africa, Morocco, which has also been open for months. Hisham Mamdi Aloui, are you here, Hisham?
Hi, Wendy.
You're on the ground there in Casablanca now. And can you tell us what sorts of travelers' activities are curtailed right now and what you're seeing in terms of traveler, like what are their you know, what can you do for them and what can't you do for them in Morocco?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to echo some of the things that were said about Turkey and Egypt. So Morocco has been open for several months now. To answer your question directly, in terms of activities that are curtailed, we have a curfew that is currently at 8 p.m. Everyone expects it to be lifted or pushed out to at least 10 p.m. after Ramadan, which is going to be in just about 10 days. And at the moment, again, tied to Ramadan and the point that was made earlier about Turkey, restaurants are closed, but once again, we expect that to end as of the end of Ramadan. Lastly, most of the country's monuments are also closed. So that's a direct answer to your question about restrictions. Now, the other side of the story is, again, echoing what was said about Egypt. There are so few people in Morocco at the moment that despite the restrictions around the monuments, you have an experience that really is one of a kind in terms of your ability to walk through and explore the Medinas, these ancient winding alleyways of the traditional cities of Morocco, or bereft of crowds, which in some sense is sad, but in another sense really presents quite a unique moment in time for any travelers who do want to come, and thankfully there are some, to experience Morocco in a way that is just a unique moment in time. So that's a brief snapshot about Morocco.
And what about the hotel? I mean, I've been to Marrakesh, I don't know, 9 times now. And it just strikes me that there are so many, I guess I'm really lucky that I end up in accommodations that are like sort of standalone little cottage, like riads, you know, there are in Morocco, there's a lot of like your own kind of standalone accommodations where it's not like you're in some lobby with a lot of people coming through.
Absolutely, yeah. So the riads, for folks who don't know, RIAD, that's a traditional Moroccan home, and it's very much the type of accommodations we like people to experience. A typical riad has anywhere between 6 to 12 rooms. Obviously, now with low occupancy rates, the odds are that you would have a riad to yourself. And in addition, there are uniquely low rates for privatization of riads, which is something we didn't do quite significantly prior to the pandemic and have done a lot of now. So think of a party that would ordinarily want 2 rooms in a riad. We are now able to offer, even if they just need 2 rooms, privatizing an entire riad that would have 6 or 7 rooms, so they have the whole place to themselves. And that does create some unique memories with the experiences you can curate in their courtyards with the open air experience you have in these traditional riads. So that is something that is very much an aspect of Moroccan travel that folks can take advantage of at the moment.
Hisham, thank you so much. So we've gone over time. I apologize to everybody, especially the folks in Europe who have had to stay up so late. we still have a lot of participants on this call. We have a lot of people still here. And I'm just wondering if there are any other questions that have come in that we could just spend a couple more minutes answering for travelers. Brooke, are there some other questions that have come in?
Gosh, there are a lot that have been answered in the Q&A. Thank you, everyone who answered those. One thing I think it might be worth touching on is the State Department travel advisories. Someone asked about that. Does that mean I cannot travel to one of those countries that has a level 4 do not travel advisory, which, as we all know, is what 85% of the world right now. And that does not mean you can't travel there. Those are advisories, not restrictions. Wendy, is there anything else you want to say about State Department and CDC?
I just feel like we have gotten such mixed messages. I mean, first the CDC says you can travel at low, if you're vaccinated, you can travel at low risk to yourself. Then the State Department completely decided to change its sort of criteria for country. It used to care about much more about things like crime and terrorism. That's where the State Department advisories were based on. They decided to take a lot of the criteria that the CDC is using, and which is why now 80% of the countries in the world, they're saying don't go there. But then we've had other news about all these countries opening up. So everyone, of course, everyone has their own level of COVID risk tolerance, and you have to do what is right for, and everybody also has different COVID risk perception. There are some people I'm sure who have been listening to this chat tonight, and they've been locked down in their, not going anywhere. They haven't been on a plane in more than a year, and they're probably thinking these people are nuts. But there are other people who have been continuing their lives and flying and doing what they need to do. You and I know, because we see these trip reviews that come in every day, that travelers are out there having a wonderful time. So I don't know, everybody has to take the State Department advice. Everybody has their own level of risk tolerance, as I said. Are there any other questions, or does anybody else want to comment on the State Department advisories? It's tricky to comment on.
There are a couple other questions. I feel like if the people who have stuck around this long, I wanted to especially answer them. Some people would love to hear from Diane Embry, who's the Bali and Indonesia expert. Diane, that's a part of the world we haven't really touched on because not much of Asia has opened yet. Diane, would you like to tell us what you're hearing in Bali and Indonesia?
Yes, thank you, Brooke. Bali is scheduled to open with a limited, what they're calling a green zone, on July 1st, but we don't know for certain when that will actually occur. And what they've been doing in Bali that's a little different than a lot of other countries is they started vaccinating people in tourism before they even did seniors. But now they're vaccinating in Bali, and I'll talk about the rest of Indonesia very briefly in a second, but in Bali, they're vaccinating now by regency. Regency are the different districts on the island. And the people who are in live and work in the main tourist areas. I know a number of the guides and drivers I use have already had 2 of their vaccines, and some have had 1, but a couple of the guides who live in further out regencies in Bali are still waiting to be able to get theirs. And then there are 2 small islands off of Singapore that are very popular with Singaporeans, and those are Batam and Bintan. Those islands are also due to open when Bali does. But we don't have any word yet on when Java or Komodo or Lombok or any of the other islands that tourists like to visit, when those are going to open. We also don't know yet for Bali what tourist sites will be opening and at what rate they'll be opening. So it's still a big question mark.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, I think we could be here for hours answering all the questions. If people want to write to us afterward at Ask Wendy, we can certainly give out more information there. We've tried to answer as many as we could in the Q&A box.
Yes, so if you, of course, we'll be here all week, folks. So if you have more questions, of course, you can ask them in the other chats that are coming up. You're also welcome to write them to us. Again, you can just go to Ask Wendy. And we look forward to continuing this. Tomorrow, as I said, we've got Dr. Trish, who is going to talk to us about vaccines and transmission and new coronavirus variants and how worried do we need to be. It's very interesting to find out from him kind of where he would go and where he would not go nowadays. And then we've also got, well, if you go to WendyPerrin.com, right on the homepage, you'll be able to see the Wow Week lineup. So we hope you'll come back and join us for more chats. We certainly have a lot of people signed up already. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. I mean, not just all of you viewers, but all of these travel experts who have joined us from all around the globe. I know that all of these readers and viewers really appreciate it. Thank you again very, very much. And we look forward to seeing more of you within the next few days. Thank you. Great to see you guys. Have a good evening.